it is an honor and a privilege to be here with you guys today. We will be talking about humility. As he said, orthopedic surgeons are typically not known for possessing that attribute, and so the reason I'm talking about it is because it's something that I oftentimes struggle with, and so I hope that this message is a challenge to you, similarly to how it was when I was creating it and going through it. My family and I are missionaries over in Malawi, Africa. I probably used the same joke last year when I spoke, but for those of you who thought I had a speech impediment and we described Maui, it is not Maui, Hawaii that we work in, it is Malawi, Africa. It's that thin sliver of a country in southeastern Africa, surrounded by Mozambique, Zambia, and Tanzania. We've been over there for the past year doing orthopedic surgery as our ministry focus at a small Christian missions hospital. We actually just came back for the birth of our fourth. So that picture there is actually AI edited. I impressed even myself adding in that baby there. Becca was 8 months pregnant when that picture was taken, and with a simple prompt we could create that. So that was pretty cool. The baby's name is Winter. She's 2.5 weeks old. Maverick is our 20-month-old son, and my wife, Rebecca. Sadly, those three did not come with us. You may see Adelaide, our 4-year-old with the goofy smile there, and Everest, our 6-year-old, running around the halls. If they run into you, I apologize. So we are back on furlough and are predominantly residing in Oklahoma City with Becca's parents. And they wanted to pass along their greetings this morning as well. The main text that we're going to be going through is apparently 2nd Philippians, according to my dad. I hadn't heard it described as that before, but we'll roll with that. But Philippians chapter 2 is our main text. This book that I'm displaying on the screen is our supplemental text for the day. This was a book that my mother got for me, I think acknowledging that I struggled with pride in my life and hoping I would read it. It took me about 15 years to finally get around to doing that. The 35-hour flight from Blantyre to Oklahoma City gave me ample time to accomplish that task. If you haven't read this book, it's pretty darn short, and it's quite impactful, so I'd highly encourage that. And this will be the supplementary text for today. The reason that I chose to speak on this topic, I already acknowledged. Humility is something that I struggle with in my day-to-day life, and it's something that I really think is super important. So that's really why I wanted to chat about that. I don't know about y'all, but it's something that the opposite of pride is something that I'm accosted with on a daily basis. The world that we live in is filled with a constant flow of self-aggrandization, brand promotion, personal edification. You turn on your phone, you turn on your television, and you're immediately greeted with the best pictures, the most incredible accomplishments of your 3,000 closest friends on Facebook. It's depressing, right? You're encountered by, look at me, look at what I've accomplished, look at how great I am. With this constant deluge that we are faced with, is this what we are intended to do as believers? Is this what Jesus wants in our lives? What does modeling our lives after Jesus' teaching in this realm really look like? In a world that tells us to push, pull, claw our way to the top, to really be something, is this what he wants? I think instead, he's calling us to race to the bottom. We're conditioned to think that greatness equals visibility. God defines greatness by service, and an example set by Jesus on this topic is much more in keeping with the race to the bottom. I like looking at history. I think it's helpful to quote if you don't look at history, you're doomed to repeat it. And so we'll chat a bit about what do some of our famous theologians of the last 500 years think about this topic. So John Calvin of the Calvinist school of theology states that it's evident that man never attains to a true self-knowledge until he has previously contemplated the face of God and come down after such contemplation. So basically a heart that's centered on a pursuit of God can't help but be centered on that of humility. How about 200 years further on? So Jonathan Edwards doesn't have quite as good of a beard or a hat, but those curls are pretty impressive. Pride is the worst viper that is in the human heart. He actually had quite a few quotes, so I included a few of them. Perhaps pride is the most hidden secret, deceitful of all lusts, and often creeps insensibly into the midst of religion, even sometimes under the disguise of humility itself. I think that's something that we often see in the church, right? Maybe a false piousness, someone who goes into missions like myself. It's easy to really embrace that. I like this one by him as well. Pride is the first sin that ever entered into the universe, and the last sin that is rooted out. Pride is the worst sin. Taking a pretty strong stance on that. We'll cross over into the 19th century. So John Stott, British theologian and author, at every step of our Christian development, in every sphere of our Christian discipleship, pride is the greatest enemy and humility our greatest friend. He followed that up with, pride is more than the first of the 7 deadly sins. It is in itself the essence of all sin. We'd probably be remiss. Don Catlett called me out on this. I apologize for how small the text is. I will addend that for the next one. But in essence, I'd really be remiss to not quote the works of C.S. Lewis. He's famous probably for most of us for his works on the Chronicles of Narnia. This is not, in fact, quoting that, but his book, Mere Christianity. In this book, he touches a lot on what does pride look like? How do we move past this? And where do we even begin? What's the first step in combating pride in our lives? To summarize it for the 3 bullet points that you probably can't read, pride is inherently competitive, deriving pleasure only from having more than others. Instead of this focus on self-promotion, he challenges us to move beyond self-measurement and instead focus our intention on God and loving others. While this is a difficult journey, and he acknowledges that, he states that the most difficult part is the first step, recognizing pride in our own hearts. By now you're probably thinking, that's great, we've just discussed 500 years worth of quotes, but what does the Bible actually say on this topic? Unsurprisingly, it's pretty darn prevalent throughout the entirety of both the Old and the New Testament. Isaiah, this is the one to whom I will look. He who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word. Proverbs, it's all over the place. You could find it in most chapters, but Proverbs 22:4, the reward for humility and fear of the Lord is riches and honor and life. Micah 6:8, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. James 4:10, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Matthew 20:26-28, it shall not be so among you, but whomever would be great amongst you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That text right there was so small. I feel like I just have 20/20 vision for sure, so y'all should be impressed with that on this screen. It's very, very tiny, so I apologize for that. The Bible is rife. It's all over. Examples of what does God desire, what does humility look like, and how troublesome is pride in our lives. This brings us to the crux of today's message. What is biblical humility? What does that look like? It's not self-loathing. It's not about hating ourselves. It's not pretending that we have no talent, no abilities. Instead, it's lowliness of mind, or valuing others above ourselves, and having an accurate view of who we are in relation to God. So let's walk through our main passage for today. So again, this is Philippians 2:3-11. We'll break it down kind of section by section and go through 3 different parts of that. So the first part, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit. Pride is always by its nature going to lead us to comparison. We're going to look at how do we compare to those around us? How do we stack up? Am I better? Am I worse? That's going to lead to bitterness when we feel inferior, or it's going to lead to judgment when we feel superior. These symptoms are going to lead us towards selfish ambition, desiring to accrue as much as we can for our own personal glory, and vain conceit. Both of these, I think we would all reiterate and understand, those aren't Christ-honoring. That's not going to bring us closer in our pursuit of God. Selfish ambition is going to encourage us to use others as a means for personal advancement and neglects their inherent beauty, their inherent worth as a child of God. Vain conceit is ultimately going to lead us towards a non-ending cycle, demanding applause and validation to stroke our fragile egos. I think that's the one that I probably struggle more with, where having the applause, having the accolades of others is certainly a driver and certainly something that I struggle with. So we've talked about the heart of the issue. Now let's talk a bit about what does the perfect example of humility look like, and that's shown in Jesus. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Specifically, we'll break it down into his status, his action, and the practical meaning of that. So the first one, he was the form of God. He was perfect, undefiled, completely unblemished, had everything. He chose instead to humble himself and didn't exploit his rights by coming to earth. He took the form of a servant. This is demonstrated time and time again throughout the Gospels, but I think the one that's most poignant to me is when he chose to wash the feet of his disciples. Sorry, Mrs. Casterline, I added an S onto the end of it. Gosh. He came as a servant. He emptied himself completely. I can't imagine anything that's more humbling than that. That really paints the picture of what perfect humility for me looks like. He came in human likeness. That's something for us that I don't think we can really comprehend, but he took on our own appearance. He chose to accept the suffering, the pain, the issues that he would encounter from the life of being a man. And finally, the ultimate example, the one that I think we most understand and can point to, he chose to die. He chose to die a human death, but not just a basic one, an extraordinarily painful one that he didn't deserve, so that we have the hope of living with him forever in heaven. Jesus did not lose his divinity when he became a servant. He proved the character of God through his service. Humility isn't an embodiment of weakness. It's not being strong enough. It's instead strength under total control. Therefore, God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. This really is the focal point of this message. God demonstrates the principle that in his kingdom, the way up is down. Man tries to self-exalt, and we end up humbled. We try to climb our way to the top. We try to really be something. At the end of the day, it just leaves us empty, not feeling that sense of fulfillment that we're so desperately seeking. Christ chose to humble himself and was exalted by God the Father. God promises us that when we let go of the need to defend our own name, our own ego, our own aspirations, he defends it for us. It doesn't end up the way that we had envisioned, or it may not end up the way that we envisioned, but God is faithful, and his plans are perfect. These are some pictures from this past year in Malawi. Actually, these are from probably 2 years ago. But this year in Malawi for us has been the most beautiful, but also the most challenging experience of our lives. Cultural differences, workplace differences from what you're used to, U.S. hospital standards in the U.S. How do you manage conflict? How do you handle just extreme cultural differences, lack of resources, differences in languages? It's really challenging. It's been incredibly rewarding for myself to work providing surgical care to children in the poorest country in the world. Being able to love on them, to minister to them both physically and spiritually during their time in need has been beyond fulfilling. With this fulfillment, however, it's also allowed me to seek pride in my work, to go ahead and seek pride in my accomplishments. And that can get to you, and I don't think that's what Christ desires for us. Thankfully, I put that in significant air quotes. God has been quick to beat that pride out of me. And so that has been the recurring thematic element of, outside of God, I am nothing and I have accomplished nothing. I won't bore you or gall you with disgusting surgical pictures, but I would love to share a bit about our ministry over in Malawi and what that looks like, if you'll permit me. Our mission for Cure International is pretty simple and pretty profound at the same time. So our goal is to provide world-class surgical care to the world's most vulnerable children for the demonstration and proclamation of the gospel. This boy on the left was a kiddo who had club foot. That's something that in the US we treat as babies with casting. In Africa, it gets completely neglected. And so you'll see these kiddos walking around for the entirety of their lives on the outside parts of their feet. And so that's what we treat a lot of, but we do a lot of other aspects as well. My day-to-day life is mostly surgical. So I spend 4 days in the OR a week. If anyone here is in an OR or theater setup, it's a little bit different. We reuse a lot of things, so those are cloth drapes and gowns. A lot of our implants are not quite as good or quite as robust as what you might find in the US. You'll notice this little girl with a walker. We build our own walkers. We fabricate our own prosthetic devices. The ward space you may see is a little bit different, where all the beds are just piled one on top of each other, so you don't have private rooms, you don't have an individual bathroom. But even in spite of that, this is by far and away the most advanced hospital in all of Malawi, and probably for that entire part of the world. This is our morning chapel service. This is something I really love about our ministry there is we frequently get asked, it's great you're providing surgical care, but what does evangelism or discipleship look like? And I'll share a bit about that. But every morning starts off for the patients and the guardians with their own worship service. Similarly for us as the staff, we have our own devotional group, so we meet for a time of scripture and a time of prayer before we dive into our days. I'm the only Westerner there, so most of the pictures it's easy to pick me out because I'm the lone white guy, so it's not too hard there. All of the kiddos and their guardians get a Bible. For most of them, that's the only book that they have in their lives. Most of these kiddos are unable to read. Literacy rates are right about 50% for the country. Our strategy as an organization, again, is quite pure, and I think it's a really awesome, practical way to live out James 1 of what does true Christianity look like, to look after the widows and the orphans and the sick, and that's really what we do. So we provide free surgical care to kiddos. So our total cost per surgery is about $1,500, which is amazing. In addition to the surgical care, as I talked about, we provide spiritual ministry, discipleship, evangelism for the patients, their caregivers, and the outlying districts throughout Malawi. These kiddos are often the most vulnerable members of society because when you have no money and you have lots of children, kiddos with special needs or disabilities often get completely neglected. The final aspect that we're really passionate about is education and equipping nationals. So that comes from both a medical perspective, where we train residents and fellows, so how to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. We're also training nurses, we're educating medical students, but on the spiritual side of things, we're training pastors, we're doing seminary classes, and so it's really an all effective and all-facing ministry, which is beautiful. These are some of the kiddos that we treat. And so I don't know if all the videos will play, but we'll try. But we've got Sarah there on the left side of the screen. We've got Esau in the middle and Jacob on the right. And that's what they look like. So they come into your clinic, and that's how she's lived her life, is with that horrible bend in her knees. A lot of that is nutritional, where these kiddos have really poor nutritional statuses. This is a boy with cerebral palsy. It's actually a really mild form. But instead of getting physical therapy when he was young and bracing, his muscles over time contracted. And so he walks, and he can't even afford a proper walking stick. And so he's another kiddo that we're going to do a surgical procedure on. How about this boy in the middle? He was born without the lower part of his shin bone. And that's a condition we would treat at 1 year of age in the States. He's 13, and that's how he's walked. And so he's in the middle of a 3-part surgical correction process to give him an almost normal leg, which is pretty crazy to think that these kids can go from this degree of disability to running, playing, keeping up with their peers, and in this setting, being able to work for their families and help sustain their own families. We have 8 hospitals, 7 of which are in Africa. The reason that we targeted this region mostly is because this region is extraordinarily poor. So 22 of the 25 poorest countries in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa, where our hospitals are largely based. Malawi, this is older data, but has a familial income per family, they earn about $400 per year. So that's pretty crazy when you put that in perspective. Cure International as a whole, we did 21,000 surgeries amongst those 8 hospitals last year. So surgeries every single day, like those 3 kiddos that you saw, which is pretty incredible. More importantly, however, we reached 300,000 children with the gospel. So 300,000 intentional conversations with parents and their guardians. And at Cure alone last year, Cure Malawi, where we're at, we had 20,000 kiddos decide to become followers of Jesus. Twice a month, we're sending out mobilization teams to all regions of Malawi. It's 25 million people. And in the course of a year, we'll reach every single district 2 times. And so it's pretty incredible when you look at just that coupling of an intentional gospel outreach with pretty amazing surgical care. It's really a beautiful package. For me this year, I came very much expecting to be celebrated almost as Russell Crowe in Gladiator after he, kills off the other gladiator. And that was my, image that I had painted, maybe a bit wishful thinking. And it certainly has not been that. It's been a struggle of learning how do you deal with significant cultural differences, of fitting into a very different culture where conflict is handled not directly face to face, but through intermediaries. You have a much more significant hierarchical system than we might be accustomed to in the U.S. How do you manage, just lack of resources, extraordinarily high levels of poverty? And it's really difficult. But I think if there was a thematic verse for the year, or verses, 4 in total, it would be this passage from Luke. I'll read that real quick. When you're invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say to you, give your place to this person, and then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you'll be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. Just really emphasizing the aspect that instead of seeking out that position of honor, that position of prestige, be a servant. Be someone who serves those around us, similar to the example that Jesus set for us. And if, you're going to get elevated, it's a heck of a lot better position to be in than being told, get your tail out of there. We got someone else that's in a little bit better position than you. So as we prepare to close, I think it's important for us to, one, acknowledge the problem. That's what C.S. Lewis said, is the hardest step towards change in this area is actually seeing it in our own lives. And so for you guys, look at your own life, look introspectively. Where is pride creeping in? Is it creeping in school, in work, your family, your business? Where is it at? And as we're acknowledging that we do all struggle with pride in some arena or another, I think it's important to look at how can we combat that. And so it's going to be a daily challenge. This is from that book, Humility, that I'd referenced earlier. And he starts off by saying that it starts at time point 0. So right as soon as we wake up, practicing spiritual disciplines. So falling to your knees in prayer, seeking God, spending time in the Word. And I really liked his other 3 major points on this as well. It starts with a reflection on the wonder of the cross and the sacrifice that Jesus served for us on there. This hymn by Isaac Watts from the mid-1700s, when I survey the wondrous cross on which the Prince of Glory died, my richest gain I count but loss, and pour contempt on all my pride. And so by really looking towards Christ, that's going to automatically quell the pride that we're struggling so immensely with. Similarly, beginning our day acknowledging our need for God. I don't know about you guys, but I often tend to ruminate and get lost in my thoughts, where if something didn't go well, I am in this downward circular spiral where it just leads to, worse and worse feelings. And I really like this quote by Martin Lloyd-Jones. Most of your unhappiness in life is due to the fact that you're listening to yourself instead of talking to yourself. It's powerful, right? As we start our day in prayer, as we acknowledge our need for God, just setting our mindset in the right place and not allowing our thoughts to drift, not allowing ourselves to go down those rabbit holes. Finally, begin our day expressing gratitude towards God. I like this quote a lot as well. Thankfulness is a soil in which pride does not easily grow. Regardless of the situation that we find ourselves in, we have a lot to be thankful for. It's amazing for the kiddos that we take care of over in Malawi. For their families, their income is well less than $1 a day. That's pretty crazy to think about. And yet they're the happiest children I've ever encountered. Despite their economic ailments, despite their physical disabilities, they're happy. And I think that's a really strong testimony to the effect that we need to be thankful, and we have lots to be thankful for. So finally, again, as we close, 3 micro habits for the week. These are small little things that I think we can do towards strengthening the embodiment of humility. So first, listen without defending. So next time someone criticizes you, instead of instead of formulating a comeback, just listen. Stand there, take it in, and respond back. Maybe don't respond back. I tend to jump quickly towards defending myself, offering a quick rebuttal without really thinking much about that, and it assuredly is not effective. Serve in secret. Do a chore, pay a bill, volunteer here at church without getting any accolades or recognition for your service. I think oftentimes we do a lot of things in service because we like how it makes us feel. We like, the prestige and the acknowledgement from others. But what does that look like without that? Again, pushing us towards humility. And finally, the celebration of others. It's good to celebrate the accomplishments of those around us. It's a bit more challenging to celebrate them if maybe that was something that you wanted or were hoping to accomplish. And so that's the challenge for me in my hospital setting. How can I celebrate my coworkers, the individuals I work with, who I might be having some strife or interpersonal conflict with, and really humbling myself, acknowledging their incredible accomplishments, and celebrating them through that. Thanks so much, guys. I have prayer cards at the back. There have a link to both of these QR codes as well. The QR code on the left is to a mailing list. Some of you might already be on it, but we do a monthly email update list, and that will be found on the QR code. The link on the right is to our Instagram page. We don't really use it very much, but it has some pictures that Becca adds on there. So yeah, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak with y'all today about this. Would love to talk more about our ministry over in Malawi at the end of the service. And I'll pray real quick and have the worship team come on up. Dear God, thank you so much for a chance to share, to talk, a chance to share a bit about what we've been doing in Malawi. I pray that this message would encourage us all towards a more intentional pursuit of humility, towards a more intentional pursuit of you, acknowledging just our need, our shortcomings, the issues that we struggle with, God. I pray that you'll bless this church, bless the members, just help it to continue to grow and thrive. May we honor you in what we say and do. In your name, amen.